also excited about. So there's this cupcake that provides scholars. I was going to spend the first 10 minutes of this the cupcake, but I decided I'm going to monetize that video later. Yeah, nothing to go wrong with that. I'm not. So, okay. So yeah, so Julian and the content talk about it. Style that I um, so Ebony White disciples the spirit realized this classic long-running comic is the poster child for comics problematic racial history. She's a prominent and troubling figure in the work of one communities with significant investigative creators. It doesn't seem to be a huge subject of debate that this character is straight up racist. But significant part of real life but still Ebony can't be rendered as a footnote or an important over the like the best spirit without without stories. Um, However, throughout the character's long history, fans and Eisner scholars have tried to revise the relationship, often with some textual, historical, and linguistics in the process. One of my goals in this essay was to provide some historical and biographical context to illustrate Eisner's position on evidence through the complex, often emotional responses that he, as well as some of his strongest defenders, had to criticism. And in general, I want to examine the debates that occur as creators, fans, critics, and scholars try to negotiate his legacy and the problematic racial distribution of comics. To these ends, I want to go through some of the most common misconceptions about both Eisner and Ebony. So Ebony debuts the very first Spirit section from June 2nd, 1940, though he's not identified by name. Is. Instead, he's an anonymous cab driver who appears in this one panel. He shows up again, still unnamed in the second story, but only in the third story is he actually identified by name in the Spirit comments. Here, I say, every time I call a cab, you're not a reaching the cab comes down. From this point on, the Spirit hires Ebony to be his personal cab driver to soon after Ebony is identified as the Spirit's valet and his faithful friend. So Ebony, with his big saucer eyes, giant red clown lips, and instant speed, is a fixture of the series from the very start, serving as valet sidekick. These characteristics align Ebony with the human figure, one of the black stereotypes that Donald Bogle identifies in Hollywood film. According to Bogle, the primary role of the Queen is comic relief, quote, presenting the hero as a human object of black cocoon, often appearing as the picture subtype played in film by black children. He further identifies the Queen as, quote, the most blatantly degrading Eisner ended the Spirit section in 1952, but fans of the strip retained nostalgic fondness for it, leading Eisner to pursue reprint opportunities later. Harvey Comics released a 2-issue reprint series in 1966. And interestingly, none of the reprints in these 2 issues contain Ebony. and the new origin of the story. In 1973, Eisner began a long professional relationship with Dennis Kitchen, whose Kitchen Sinks Press published 2 more issues of Spirit reprints along with some additional new Spirit stories, which we'll get to in a little bit. And then here's the rest of the Spirit's reprint history after Kitchen Sinks did those 2 issues. Warren picked up reprints of Black and White magazines from 1976. After once got going, they canceled it and picked it up again in 1977. That Black and White magazine side series ran for a few years, and then in 1983, started comic book size color reprints, essentially republish all of the Spirit. Costs led it to switch to black and white for a while, and that ran into 1992, and then starting in 2000, got the license for the Spirit to publish 26 volumes of every single story. So that, so we can see this long reprint publication history has kept the Spirit in print for quite a long time now. Too. And then later license holders like Kitchen Sinks have published new Spirit comics by various creators, whose new stories show creators wrestling with Eisner's legacy and modernize the series. For example, in Darwin Cook's Spirit series for DC, he kept Ebony White as a young cat rather sidekick to the Spirit, but he removed the egregious character elements and suggestions to register as the other characters in the series. Other Spirit creators follow suit. DC's 2010 First Wave series of Brian Azzarello and Ryan Morales definitely that sidekick. While the various miniseries published by Dynamite had Ebony as a professional body detective and was successful. Therefore, although Spirit stories have gone in and out of print since their debut in 1940, the series remains relatively vital, and with it, readers and creators have wrestled with the representation of Ebony White over those 50 years. Will Eisner died in 2005 at the age of 87, and having seen his early work on the Spirit celebrated his groundbreaking comics that expanded on only possibilities of medium and influenced generations of creators. Eisner reveled in his role as a comic pioneer, often citing how he had seen comics as an art form that could break free of the stigma that it was juvenile and subliterate. In his essay on Eisner and the City, Greg Smith describes 2, quote, seemingly contradictory tendencies in Eisner's comics. First, Eisner demonstrates, quote, a masterful command of the formal expressiveness in comics, quote, which reveals itself through narrative and formal experimentation that makes Eisner, quote, a modernist extraordinaire, 20th century artist concerned with the nature of the medium, quote. However, as Smith continues, Eisner also appears to be a retrograde figure bogged down in melodramatic content in the 19th century. Smith argues that the latter tendency stems from the influence of the Wanzo stage on Eisner. Another much more problematic and pernicious influence of 19th century popular on Eisner was blackface. Eisner experienced strong criticism over the creation of Ebony White and the racism inherent in the character's portrayal. Eisner's responses to this criticism evolved over time, but invariably took the defensive posture, with claims that such images were so commonplace in popular culture at the time that he had no real choice in how a young African-American boy would be depicted. As he asked in 1978 Cat Ironwood interview, I realized that Ebony was a stereotype of a caricature, but how else could I have created a black boy in that era at that time? Certainly, Eisner was not alone in creating such a racist caricature. In fact, Rebecca Wanzo notes about the racist caricature in Thomas Nast's early cartoons. Racist caricature was not a side note to U.S. cartoons emergence. Therefore, Ebony White is just one part of a long tradition. However, such defenses stand in furious contrast to Eisner's claims to an important historical role as the innovator and experimenter in comics form. On the one hand, he actively pushes against many comic conventions. On the other hand, he stands helpless in the face of another. Eisner is defensive because the accusations of racism like that innovator. The comics writer Brian Michael Bendis encapsulates this dichotomy in his foreword for Eisner's Fake Jew. How could Eisner have created such a racist caricature when, quote, everything about Will and his writing had been impressive and sometimes ridiculous at this time? Eisner expresses exasperation with such questions in the 1970 interview that he would have 37 more years of interviews for this topic to come up. However, his answers would be repeated often over the years. He would claim an equal number of complaints and praise from fans. He would cite the popularity of similar racial caricatures at the time, especially Andy. He would explain that comedy often involves stereotyping and laughing at others' foibles, including their informal speech patterns. He would argue that Ebony was a well-rounded, complex character created with tremendous affection, and that set him apart from other racial caricatures that were created in the community. And he would explain that after World War II, the series became much more progressive, with Ebony being phased out in favor of more realistic African American characters, including a detective named Ray. Others have picked up on Eisner's explanation and accepted them critically. In Black Images in the Comics, Frederick Stromberg writes, Ebony began his career as a traditional black supporting character and, with clean lips and southern drawl, represented a very conscious use of classical stereotype. Ebony gradually developed into more than just a humble sidekick, however. The change is especially visible when Eisner returned to the series after his service in World War II. Ebony received a more pronounced and equal role, and new black characters were introduced to the script. Among them were Detective Lieutenant Gray, who was drawn in a more realistic way and spoke dramatically correct English without any traces of Southern dialect. End quote. So that quote from Stromberg is very typical of a lot of the work that Ebony White in particular, and kind of encapsulates a lot of the explanations like this have become fixed in the history of Eisner's career. However, they are all problematic and in some cases do not hold up to scrutiny and evidence from the comics. Of particular note here, though, is a distinction that Eisner and others made, which a distinction between caricatures that are created with some hateful intent and characters who are created with clear capacity. In this distinction, image obtains less importance than authorial intent. This caricature, what I call the caricature distinction, pops up frequently in the discourse on Ebony White, especially as a point of contention with readers and fans of the spirit and Eisner in general. In the 1968 interview with John Benson, Eisner offers what will become a fairly standard answer to questions about Ebony. He explains that, quote, somewhere around 1949, he received 2 letters on the same day. One a complaint about Ebony's former school friend, who was shocked and dismayed at the character. The other from the editor of a black newspaper in Baltimore, congratulating him on the courage in showing the character like that. Neither of these letters survived, at least not in the Eisner archives at Ohio State's Billy Ireland Library, where I looked for them. But some of the surviving letters from early 1940s do indicate that Eisner probably received such messages of support and criticism. In a letter dated 17 October 1941, Eisner responds to praise about Ebony from an editor at the Philadelphia Record, by thanking the editor in the voice of Ebony. Late that same month, Eisner received a letter from the office manager at the Register and Tribune Syndicate, which handled the spirit sections. Quote, "We had a letter from a youngster in New Jersey saying that he and a group of his friends had formed a club called Ebony's. The young man, whose race is unidentified, requested drawing of Ebony for the club. Then, in mid-November of 1941, Eisner had a correspondence with two editors. One, Chuck Lounsbury, was responding to complaints about Ebony in the Spirit Daily strip that was running at the time. Lounsbury, quote, established boundaries and advised caution on Ebony. Later letters that month indicate Lounsbury was satisfied with the Eisner made the strip. Eisner claimed in a 1965 interview with the New York Sunday Herald Tribune magazine with Marilyn Mercer that Ebony never received criticism from black organizations. However, other comics publishers did receive complaints about the racial caricatures, some coming from organizations who specifically targeted comics. For example, in 1945, Fawcett dropped the character Steamboat from the Captain Marvel comics due to a specific request from the North Sea Youth Builders. In 1947, Dell Comics dropped Little 8 Ball, feature from the 20s that received protests from black school children and by the Cultural National Congress, who also targeted similar characters from the publishers. Therefore, it would seem unlikely that a comic like The Spirit, with distribution in over 20 newspapers nationwide, that amounted to over 5 million copies per week, would not see similar protests. However, Eisner claimed in that interview that Ebony never. Eisner returned from service late in 1945 and soon went back to work on The Spirit. He frequently explained that his experience in the war, seeing the segregation and unfair treatment of African American soldiers, caused him to rethink Ebony White's role in the strip, especially after seeing how his ghostwriters and artists had depicted the character. Eisner also later claimed that Lou Fine's depiction of Ebony was problematic. According to Bob Andelman, quote, Eisner complained about the way Fine drew Ebony, giving him a large ass that wasn't there before. Eisner felt it crossed the line of even acceptable stereotyping at the time. This is the best picture I could find. In the February 10th, 1946 section titled As Ever Orange, Ebony romances as ever for Valentine's Day. Ebony faces competition from rival suitor Fraternization H. Shack, Captain Air Corps. As Ever rejects Ebony because, as she says, it sounds like a Civil War instrument. We see Ebony's heartbroken response here in the interview. Ebony then leaves school only to be quickly replaced in the following story by the Spirit's Eskimo sidekick, Blubber. The May 12, 1946 strip, 3 months after Ebony left for school, features a homecoming party for Ebony, and Blubber returns to his own home in Arctic, never to be seen again. However, Ebony does not seem to hear significant change with the dog. The comments that I was that dialogue was many who write on Eisner then, including Robert Greenberger in the Library of Death novels on Eisner, point out that this particular story is a turning point for Ebony. They claim that when Ebony returns from school, Eisner at the very least adjusts his speech patterns and dialect, though that doesn't seem to be the case in this panel. Others, like Tom Heinrich, state that Ebony is rarely seen following his return. However, Ebony remains a regular character in the series until September 18, 1949, in a story called Word Love. He then disappears without any explanation until June 24th, 1951, a story called School is Out. This focuses entirely on Ebony and his friends, and one of the interesting things about this story is that it's clear when Ebony is sent to school earlier that he's going to have um, and this story was written by Jules Pfeiffer and likely drawn by Andre Long, probably without much input from Eisner at all. And from this point on, though, Ebony becomes stays a regular character in the series until it ends in 1952. So when the Spirit briefly returned in 1973 in the Kitchen Sink review series, Eisner contributed 4 new one-page stories to the first issue. Each of these stories seems to be addressing some criticism of the old Spirit. For example, one addresses criticism of Spirit, violence, crime. And then this one seems to be this uses a straw man in the position of this black reporter to argue a position that would appear to be common complaint that I received. The black reporter interviews Ebony, accusing the character of Uncle Tomism for taking on the secondary subservient role of the Spirit's partner instead of a stronger central leading role that would better serve the cause of race and black identity. The interview is interrupted by the Spirit, who asks Ebony about the status of an investigation into a drug pusher who had been dealing at local schools. Ebony explains how he single-handedly gathered evidence against the pusher and then captured him. After the explanation, Ebony turns to the reporter and asks him to repeat the question while the reporter looks away. The purpose of this strip then seems to be proof that Ebony does not warrant the criticism he has received on racial grounds, because he is in fact a resourceful, independent character who is capable of fighting crime on his own. However, this argument does not address some of the most the primary problems with the character as a racial caricature, especially his appearance and his voice. In fact, for this strip, Eisner has toned down Ebony's dialect considerably from the character's past appearances, leaving out some of his most common expressions. It also belies the fact that most of Ebony's appearances from the Spirit section is used as comic relief, not an equal crime fighting partner. In addition, the drug dealer that Ebony captures to demonstrate his positive social impact is a criminal type that would not have appeared in the previous piece at all. And so this scene presents Ebony in a role that he never really had. When the Spirit moves from Kitchen Sink to Warren, the new magazine features 11 pages with readers' contemporary reactions to the returns. In these pages, the debate over Ebony White's return in earnest starting in the fourth issue of October 1964 with a letter from William Williams, who wrote, "The basis for my complaint is the character Ebony in the Spirit series. I find him offensive. His appearance and speech, anything and refrain cannot be condoned. I, as a black man, manage to speak and write English to a fair degree. He does not look like a monkey. I must explain this book to my children. And if that is the case, I challenge the treatment of that character in this book as bigotry." Editorial response follows many of the typical patterns I had already set. Ebony's a product of its time, characters created to protect dignity, humor often depends on stereotypes, and so on. The response also points out the stereotypes of prevalent in contemporary culture. True, Ebony is a stereotype and a parody, but no more than Archie bunker is of middle class America, or Desi Arnaz of the Cuban immigrant. Williams returned to the latter page of the following issue, arguing that such a comparison was a farce. Other letters began appearing in support of Epstein-Eisner, including one by an African-American reader who says he finds Epstein offensive. The controversy continued to stir in subsequent issues, dominating the letter page. Warren responded to the controversy by publishing a special all-ebony issue, with number 7, complete with a new cover and by Eisner depicting a weeping Ebony left resting in a wounded spirit. The story is reprinted in the all-ebony issue, paint a narrow picture of the character and are ostensibly meant to support the claim that Ebony is a well-rounded, independent, industrious character. Several of these stories involve Ebony taking on various occupations, such as private detective, in the story East, where he opens a detective agency, spelled A-T-I-F, a bill collector in the story the medical profession in the story called Young Dr. Ebony, an explorer in The Explorer. Defenders of Ebony's character often cite these particular occupations as evidence that Ebony was a trailblazing figure, taking on jobs that were otherwise closed to African Americans at the time. For example, David Hayes, in a 2015 essay that surveys Ebony's development as a character over the course of his career, discusses these stories as evidence of his progress. However, this conclusion ignores the very source of the humor in these stories, the inversion of expectations represented by an uneducated black youth who could think that he was a doctor, a private detective, or architect explorer. Ebony does not demonstrate a breaking down of racial barriers. Instead, he demonstrates the credibility of those barriers by showing how humorously inept and misguided he is. In Young Dr. Ebony, a send-up of popular hospital melodramas like Young Dr. Kildare, Ebony decides to flee crime fighting for a life in the medical profession. The job he gets, though, is as a veterinary hospital. In The Explorer from January 16, 1949, has Ebony once again giving up on crime fighting and heading to the North Pole. Well, if he thinks that he has arrived in the Arctic, he has not left Central City, and what he thinks is the North Pole, the telephone pole. Again, the humor in this story lies in Ebony's gross misunderstanding and abject failure at these professions, rather than Ebony relying on any kind of intelligence and duties. The debate that played out in the Warren magazine letter pages, which stopped around issue 8, along with Eisner's own defense, repeated in interviews throughout his life, makes the argument that character transcends caricature. This distinction becomes useful in understanding the role that racial characters play in the history of comics, as well as the ways in which fans and creators have attempted to address or rationalize economic development race. In this caricature versus character dichotomy, proponents of character obviously prioritize the way a character is written and the way they are drawn. The character's personality, ethics, and actions are the components that make it timeless, whereas the character's image is tied directly to the historical period of culture was created. This creates an interesting and troubling paradox. An individual creator like Eisner may be held as a creative genius, but the characters he creates, while being powerless, is the zeitgeist of political life. This paradox extends even further for Eisner, who would appear to be innovative and aggressive in every aspect of his creativity, except for race. I want to run through the rest of this. So here's the aforementioned character, Lieutenant Gray, first shows up in a two-part story called Ogie Yogi. And this is the character that Eisner and others claim to be sign of his progress. He's a detective that doesn't so much team up with the spirit, however, but goes off on a separate investigation. And then he comes back almost a year later in a story called The Return of Rock. Those critics who claim that Eisner created this character of the Captain Gray, used it frequently, leave out, or don't that doesn't really reflect the reality of the series. There's only twice. In the first story, about 6 minutes. In the second story, he keeps up with everything tracked down. Um, a missing dog. And as I think Deere points out, the contrast between Ebony and Gray in Rogers in particular highlights Ebony's independence more than it progresses racial awareness on Eisner, but shows progress in Eisner's racial awareness. However, Eisner did claim that that Lieutenant Gray was the first character in the history of first black character in the history of popular fiction. First black man in popular fiction who spoke without a southern drawl, didn't act like Step Effective, and was a man accepted. I don't need to prove that that's wrong, right? That's like, and later on he claimed the commentary on Roger, I said comics like that also is not true, so we're not going to go into a whole litany there why that's wrong. And so many claim that Gray collaborated with the Spirit on several cases after his first appearance. None of that is borne out by the comic itself. In fact, and that it indicates some kind of progress that we could reject based on one particular story that followed the appearance of Penny Gray, which is a story called Bebop, which Eisner even said was defensible. That introduces a character called Tebow, who's a master of the dozen and fits inside Ebony's pocket. He shows up more often than Lieutenant Gray. He returns in another story called Circus of Crime. So, just to wrap up here then. So readers are faced with the kind of choice when confronting realizing Spirit comics today. The final question is, how should Ebony White factor into realizing's legacy? Foremost, the character's racist portrayal is undeniable and indefensible. Racism is not measured on a balance sheet where the creation of a little-used character like Lieutenant Gray wipes the slate clean, or where the heroic qualities of Ebony's character in two stories somehow counterbalance the stereotypes. As such, acknowledging and identifying the stain as an important and necessary component of Eisner's legacy as a comic creator, his work remains in print and widely available for readers' assessment more than 80 years after. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what a lot of the defenders would want. That's why they overemphasize installation. Yeah. Yeah. good. Terrible. And so he's so much more as a comedy there. It's hard to see that. Other but yeah, so thanks for that question about the diet. Um, when the as that one story does specify, the character specify that he speaks with his summertime on a black woman that and wants to speak with an older child. Tarzan goes that. What was that? So I have not done a comparison with that, but I think also because thoughts like that, except for black characters,